It shouldn't come as any particular surprise, but Alaska is not like any other state in the entire Union of the United States. And this is a pretty undisputed, and today we're going to be talking about all the things that you really don't appreciate about Alaska until you travel to the lower 48. Before we get started though, do make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, because believe it or not, some of you watch quite a bit and don't actually subscribe, and that does hurt my heart because we're trying to get to 10,000 subscriptions and we're getting really close. Do need your help to get us over that finish line, so if you would go ahead and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. Let's go ahead and jump into today's video though, talking about the things you don't appreciate about Alaska until you go travel somewhere else. First thing about Alaska you are not really going to appreciate until you go somewhere else is that the pace of life in Alaska is going to be a lot slower than you're going to find in most other parts of the country. What I mean by this is you go to most of the big cities and it's going to be just hectic and stressful. And even just in the smaller towns, like it's starting to kind of get that same feel as well. Meanwhile, when you go to Alaska, obviously we have enough stress of our own up here, don't get me wrong, but it is a completely different pace of life. And that is completely different. That's one of the big draws for a lot of people who do decide to move up here, is that the pace of life is definitely a lot slower. Not quite island time like what you're going to have in Hawaii, but it is definitely a completely different lifestyle up here across the board. One of the other big reasons that people really appreciate about Alaska after they've lived here and then they try to go somewhere else is that there are really some drastic differences in the seasons. And we have the summertime, and that's what we have right now, and is absolutely beautiful. This is one of our sunniest summers we've had that I can remember in recent history. And it's pretty glorious. I mean, sun's out all the time. You've got the salmon running. You can go do the halibut charters, whale watching, and hiking, just all these cool things out here. But on the other side of that, we do have winter, and you've got the northern lights. You can do the skiing. You can do a bunch of other, like, more winter activities like snow machining. And then obviously you do get the fall time frame where you got the changing of the colors and everything's like really gold and red and just really beautiful up here as well. Not quite as good as Vermont from what I've been able to get from Reputation, but pretty spectacular nonetheless. So there are going to be some big changes in seasons, and that's going to be one of the big reasons that people really appreciate about Alaska as well, is just that there are these changes in seasons, and it's not like, well, I'll pick on a state. It's not like Texas where, you know, you better believe it's going to start hot and then it can get hotter, or it's going to get a little less hot, but it's pretty much just got one setting for the most part. Oh, rainy. There we go. Rainy. That's another setting that Texas has. So there's some big differences up here in the seasons, and that's something you definitely do come to appreciate once you've lived up here for a little bit. This might be one of the biggest ones for most people, and that is in Alaska, from just about anywhere, you can drive maybe 30-40 minutes in any direction, and you're in the wilderness. You know, you're somewhere that's really remote, and you can really just get a sense of nature and disconnecting, be able to kind of slow down a little bit and collect your own thoughts. And for a lot of people, that is, again, kind of a lifestyle piece, but just being able to step outside and really just see the wilderness out there at a pretty easy access is something that's really hard to quantify, but it is something that's really important to Alaskans up here. Just as an example, my girlfriend and I, we went and hiked Crow Pass last weekend and just saw all sorts of wildlife as we were hiking that whole 23-mile hike, and saw like a couple of black bear frolicking around on the other side of the valley. We saw bald eagles. We saw Dall sheep up on the mountain that we were hiking by. And I'm pretty sure there's some other stuff too. Ducks. I mean, I don't know if we want to count those, but there you go. So there's just a lot more wilderness out here than you're going to find in other places. Compare that to, I was in Florida, not to pick on Florida, but I was there and I was going to go parasailing, and I was getting all the harnessed up and everything. And I was talking to the gal at the booth, and I saw like this little island thing where a lot of people were sitting out on like this, looked like kind of a rocky beach with like stereo systems and blaring and all that out there. And I was like, what's that over there? She said, oh, that's where people go when they want to, like, connect with nature and everything. It was like, that? Seriously? So it's a lot easier to get a little bit closer to nature a lot quicker in Alaska than it is anywhere else. That's my point. Okay, made my point. We're moving on. I've had the opportunity to see this next one in person a number of times, and that is that when everything goes south, Alaskans in general will have each other's backs. For example, back in 2018, when the big earthquake went through, neighbors were out there helping neighbors out, just dealing with the after effects of all of that, and making sure power was on because it was during winter time, and so it was a big concern that everyone's power was going to go out and your lines were going to start busting and everything. And just really the community everywhere that was hit just pulled together, and we were able to get through it and really more or less back to normal within about a week or so. I'm not sure in a lot of other communities if it would have happened that way, but in Alaska, it is just kind of a given in any community that if something like that happens, we're going to band together and we're going to get through it because, we've had some practice with natural disasters, and that's just what's expected of you. All right, we're going to keep going in just a second here, but before we do, though, I just wanted to make sure you all were aware I do host a podcast called the Alaskan Journey Podcast, where I interview people who've recently moved to Alaska or people who've lived here for years who can kind of share their experience about what it's like living up here. So if it's a journey you're considering making yourself in the near future, do make sure you go take advantage of that, and that's going to be a great resource for you as you're trying to state up and decide if this is a place that you want to eventually settle down in. So make sure you go check that out. Link for that is in the description section down below. Now, let's go and finish up today's video, though. Now, keep in mind on this next one, I do not have any data or anything like that I can fall back on. I can just kind of speak anecdotally that it does feel like the air quality in Alaska is better than most other places in the lower 48. When I step off the plane in some places, especially like the big cities, I mean, you can feel the air quality difference just stepping outside, and then you come back to Alaska and it's like, oh, this is nice. I can, breathe fully right now and not be concerned about what the air is doing to my lungs. And it's not something you really, really appreciate until you've lived in Alaska and you've kind of felt that pristine air quality that we do have up here. So yeah, that is definitely a big one. Again, I don't have any data right here in front of me like to really back it up, just kind of speaking anecdotally though. The degree of separation for everybody in Alaska is ridiculously small compared to other states. What I mean by that is it's a really small town up here just overall. It's like 770,000 people or so. Last I checked, if I recall correctly, it might be 734. Somewhere in there, but definitely below 800,000. And so you can imagine how easy it is to have, if you're good at networking, that you can pretty much connect with just about anybody in the state just because the degree of separation is so small compared to anywhere else. As always, anytime I'm talking about crime and homelessness, I'm always going to advise you to go check out the crime maps just of whatever area it is that we're talking about, just to make sure you can make any determinations for yourself if it's going to be a good area or bad area for you specifically. But I will say, one of the big things that I like about Alaska is it's usually pretty easy to avoid certain areas that do have high crime and high homelessness. And, well, high homelessness, like for what Alaskans are used to. So this is really useful because, once you start looking at the stats, you'll realize there are certain areas that do the heavy lifting really for the entire state as far as our stats go and throw everything off. And it's going to become pretty evident pretty quickly. So do go check that out and just really appreciate the fact that it's usually pretty simple in Alaska to be able to avoid these specific areas in a state as large and diverse as Alaska. All right, for my outdoorsmen and outdoors women, it is really nice in Alaska that you can pretty much go fill your freezer every summer with fish, and you can fill it with game. So if you are someone who's a hunter and maybe you're a fisher person as well, fisherman, fisherwoman, I don't care, that can go out there and really just fill out your entire dip netting card or just your sports fishing card. Like, that is incredible, and it is a great way to get some high quality meat without necessarily having to break the bank. So it's a huge thing that you're going to appreciate in Alaska that you don't get to harvest the land as much in other states as you do in Alaska. So if you're up here, do take advantage of that. For most people who are up here, it is definitely a big benefit to us that the population is as small as it is. If you have you come from a pretty large state, you're going to appreciate just how small the population is in Alaska. I mean, we've got multiple cities. I'm going to have to go look it up sometime and see just how many just individual cities are bigger than the entire population of the state of Alaska. but the population is a lot smaller here. It's very rare that we're like just right on top of each other, that we run into these areas where people don't have space. And even if you are, it is super easy to be able to get some elbow room and go somewhere else for a little bit and kind of get that, get that ability to escape a little bit if it does feel like everyone's on top of you. So yes, population is a lot lower here. Population density is much lower here than it's going to be anywhere else. And that is something that Alaskans are very grateful for. Last but not least, the wildlife in Alaska is really, really difficult to top anywhere else. And what I mean by that is you just step out your door and there's literally a moose like right there in your driveway. I was actually interviewing someone a little bit ago for the podcast, and they were late because, he and his wife were stepping outside, and they're like, sorry, man, there's a moose literally just sitting in our yard blocking us from getting to our car. And you really just don't get that access to that kind of wildlife anywhere else. Like I mentioned before, hiked Crow Pass this past weekend. I could see bear just playing around on the side of the mountain. There's actually reports where we were hiking to that there's like a wolf pack in the area. So I'm pretty sure they saw us. We didn't see them. And you just don't really get that access anywhere else because, it's the last frontier. What did I miss? Is there anything about Alaska that you really appreciate that I didn't include on this list? If that's the case, make sure you post those in the comments section down below. But thank you very much for watching. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'd be happy to help.